Chapter 19. The television played at a low volume in the corner. I'd only turned it on for him. There was nothing on but soap operas and an infomercial about a mop, neither of which were too appealing. He'd left my room only once to shower since placing me on my bed. Since then, he'd been staring out my window, across the yard, probably thinking of all the places he'd rather be. I pulled out the book Katie lent me and hoped to keep my eyes off my new warden. "You can leave, you know," I said again to the back of the fresh green t-shirt that I knew without looking did amazing things to his eyes. "Slip down the hall to your room. No one would be the wiser." He shook his head without turning around. "I won't tell, I promise." "Would you please just be quiet?" he huffed. "Read your book." "Why? Do you have a headache now too?" I asked, pulling open the drawer on the nightstand. "This will take care of it," I said, shaking the prescription bottle at him. "A couple of these pills and I could roll him out of my room." "Isn't that what gave you the headache to start with?" He frowned over his shoulder. "Besides, you're the only one who can make my headache go away," he said, turning back to the window. "How's that?" "Shut your mouth," he said, crossing his arms as he leaned my desk chair back on two legs, propping his feet on the windowsill. "You shut your mouth," I said, launching the book across the room. It missed him by an inch, making the glass rattle on the window pane. "Why do you do that?" he asked, the chair slamming to the floor as he retrieved the book. "Do what?" "Act like you don't want me here," he asked, tossing the book to my bed. "Who says it's an act?" I said angrily. "I thought I was being pretty straightforward, but just in case you missed the point, get the hell out of my room." He stared at me for a long minute before stalking out the door. I laid there, drifting in and out of consciousness and trying to contemplate what it would really be like to marry a rock star, and why no one had turned this book into a movie yet. When Mama turned the doorknob, I expected it to be Thomas. "What do you want now?" I said without opening my eyes. "Just thought you might want to know that Thomas is leaving," she said, giving me a pointed look as she wiped her hands on her apron. "He mentioned something about that the other day," I said, sticking my head back under the sheet. "He has another job," I yawned. "He's leaving now," she clarified. "Your daddy said he's packing." "Good riddance," I said under my breath, though it was the last thing I felt. My chest ached at the thought of him leaving, and it made me that much angrier. "You might not get another chance to say goodbye," she hedged, pulling the door to. I knew what she meant. The last time I wasn't given the opportunity. Could I really afford to be stubborn and let him go without goodbye again? I waited until I heard her feet on the stairs before throwing the sheet back and stiffly reaching for the crutches. His door was open. He was busy rolling a stack of t-shirts. "Were you going to leave without saying goodbye? Again?" I asked, balancing against the doorframe. His hands froze for a second before stuffing another shirt in the duffel bag. "This is different," he said evenly, his eyes troubled beneath the dark flashes. "I didn't have a choice the last time." "You didn't have a phone either?" I asked, keeping my voice low so it wouldn't break. It was harder to watch him pack than I ever would have imagined. I'd always thought if I could have just been there to see him go, to say goodbye, that things would have been better, easier, but I'd been wrong. Watching him shove his life into a duffel bag, not leaving a shred of evidence in the empty dresser of his presence, was like watching a nightmare form before my very eyes. There was no doubt I'd be reliving this moment for many haunted nights to come. It was better that way. Goodbyes never do anyone any good. Holding the oversized army green duffel in one hand, he zipped it with the other. A phone call wouldn't have changed that. Maybe he was right. One phone call wouldn't have changed a thing. I turned to leave, but my crutch caught on the carpet. My hand shot out for the doorframe as the crutch fell to the floor. I tried shifting my weight to the other leg, but the pain was too much in that knee. Bracing for the inevitable, I saw the carpet coming closer just as Thomas's arms lifted me up. "You're going to break your neck," he scowled, supporting most of my weight as I tried to balance on one foot. "Why didn't you stay in bed?" "Didn't you miss me?" I asked, grasping his forearms for balance. I knew better than to wait for a response. The only person I'd ever met more stubborn than myself was Thomas. He wouldn't even meet my eyes, but that was fine. If he was going to leave anyway, there was no sense in holding back. He might not need a goodbye, but I was leaving nothing unsaid this time. "I missed you, Thomas." The words were harder to say than I expected. "I missed you so much, and you didn't write. You didn't call. Wasn't I worth at least a phone call? A letter? Anything?" Let's not do this now, he said, trying to make space between us, his eyes darting to my crutches on the floor. It would be near impossible for him to reach them without letting me go. If not now, when? In 4 years, when you need another job? I barely recognized you this time. Next time you'd better wear a sign so I don't walk right by you. Be reasonable, Breland, he said, his voice gruff, still putting up a wall. No, I insisted, bringing my hands to his chest when I was sure he wasn't going to let me go. Do you know what the worst part of this whole thing is? I honestly thought you came back here for me. I thought you'd been going through the same hell without me that I've been going through since the day I found your room empty. And then to have you walk in and look at me, or not look at me, you looked at me like I was a stranger. I paused, searching his eyes, making sure he saw me, really saw me. That hurt even worse than you not being here. What did you expect? I would walk through the door and we'd pick up right where we left off? I was in high school then. That was a lifetime ago for me. For you, maybe, but I didn't go anywhere. I've been walking the same fields, riding the same paths, and staring out the same window my whole life, and it feels like yesterday to me. You're just too young to understand, he said, shaking his head. Too young? Did you really just say that to me? I gave him some room now, leaning back against the doorframe. Was I too young the nights I hid you from the cops or the hours we spent talking in the fields? I loved you so much. Was I wrong to believe that you loved me? Because if you didn't, maybe I am too young to understand. With some of my weight off him, he bent for my crutches. Hopping on my good leg, I repositioned them beneath my sore arms, knowing I couldn't stand this way much longer without sitting. It was humiliating enough to have said everything I'd been holding in for 4 years. There was no need to add falling on my face to the list. With another deliberate hop into the hall, I turned toward my room. Wait, he stopped me, his hand restraining my wrist as his eyes stared at the ceiling before closing briefly and landing back on me. There was a resolve there that wasn't there before. His shoulders fell as he stepped closer. The tension that appeared to leave him saturated the room. The seconds ticked by, like those of the last day of school before summer break. We stared into each other's eyes, his a deep reflective green that finally appeared to be opening up. You're right. You didn't love me? I asked, my heart faltering painfully. Of course I loved you. I still love you, Bree. What he was saying made no sense. Maybe he loved me then, but if action spoke louder than words, he clearly didn't now. He was lying to spare my feelings. After all, I was on crutches because of him. Still, it was the most beautiful lie I'd ever heard in my life. I wrapped my arms around his neck, letting the crutches fall to the floor. For this one precious moment in time, I let myself believe his words. Let myself believe the man in my arms was the same boy I'd missed countless nights. He wasn't the arrogant man who turned me down in the barn. He was just the high school boy from across the street, Rusty's new brother, the boy who breathed life into the butterflies in my stomach. Don't go, I whispered, holding him tighter. Don't leave me, not again. His arms loosened too soon, his face unreadable as his forehead pressed against my own. Things are more complicated than that. No, they're not, I started. He scooped me up with one arm under my legs and carried me into the room, closing the door behind us. Your life is the same, he started, sitting me gently on the bed. Just like you said. So much has happened since I left here. Things I'd never want you to know. I hardly know the kid I was back then. He stopped at the window, peering across the street at the house that had sat vacant since he'd left, the front windows boarded. That's why I came back here. You knew me better than anyone, better than I knew myself. I thought if I could find you, see your face, he said, sitting down next to me, that I'd find myself. He tilted my chin back, taking a good look at me. Then I walk in, expecting to see the girl from the picture, and instead there's this beautiful woman in her place. What picture? He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a Polaroid. It was almost transparent in places, but on the front side was me, in cutoffs and a t-shirt, all knees and elbows, with my hair in a high ponytail. He'd swiped the picture from my dresser the day I'd taken it. I should have left then. It was clear I wasn't going to find what I was looking for, but it felt so right being back here, around your family, around you. It was selfish to stay. I took his hand and held it tightly between my own. It wasn't selfish if I wanted you here too. It was selfish to let things go on the way I have. What are you talking about? I asked, confused. You have been mean to me since the day you walked back through the door. Mean to you? He asked, quirking a smile. Is that how it came off? Look, he said, kneeling in front of me. The girl in that picture is still here. His hand cupped my face as his thumb gently stroked my cheek. You're looking for someone who doesn't exist anymore. You're still here. I can see it. He was on his feet again, pacing. You're seeing memories, Bree. You're going to have to let go of that boy in the field